Well, here we go today. We are having Bryan Haycock with us. This is a show I think you're really going to like. He is very informative about diet, exercise, and a lot of things. We're going to have him come back again. But I loved this show. So I think you're going to love it too. I had some aha moments, and we answered your questions that you sent in to us. So thank you for sending in your questions, and I think we had a really great conversation. So sit back and listen.
You're listening to Fit and Hippie with Dory and Lori. The show is about the show that covers the show that gets into
Exactly.
So today on our show, we have someone who's very, very special to me. He is a PhD in physiology.
Piled higher and deeper. That's what that stands for.
Yes. Buried under years and
Piled
years.
higher and deeper.
Exactly. Buried in years and years and years of debt. So, this is my dear friend, Bryan Haycock. He, for many, many, many years, was my mentor, coach, physiologist, friend, shrink, all of the above. I often credit him for the reason that I did so well in competitive bodybuilding as well as in my personal training career. I would always, if I would have a client or somebody who would ask me a question and I couldn't, if I didn't know the answer, I would say, well, let me go ask Jeeves, which was Bryan. And so in that way, he actually really, really helped my career, and I feel like most of my knowledge actually came from him in my career in the fitness industry.
Well, and I think we might have Bryan on fairly regularly, asking him some questions. We've talked about that.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes
Yeah,
first.
we haven't really communicated this with Bryan yet, but we are talking about it. So if you like this episode,
Yeah.
we'll keep it going.
Well, what we like about Bryan is he's got actually a few different degrees, but he has a wealth of knowledge in many different areas besides what we're going to talk about today. So we thought we'd like to have him call on this show for the truth about. So maybe once a month we'll do something on the truth about. Mm-hmm. But again, let's just see how it goes today, because today we're going to be talking about, do you want to
Yeah, we've asked our listeners some questions. What are your questions about weight loss and health and that kind of thing? So we're gonna, if you don't mind, we'll say your names and who asked the question. So if you're listening, you'll know that we're answering your question. But we got a lot of questions on the same subject, some on differing subjects, but a lot of them kind of focused around one thing in particular. So we'll kind of ask those questions of Bryan, and he can give us some answers. That'd be awesome.
That would be.
Yeah.
Bryan, is there anything you want to say? Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit? Kind of
tell us about
your background?
I'm just happy to be here. I've heard a lot about the podcast, and it's just a pleasure to be on, and hopefully I can provide some info that your listeners can relate to. And I guess I think what I hope to do in this podcast is to be able to provide a background for people's weight loss questions, that then when they go and read something else, they go, now, wait a minute, does that jive with what I learned on the podcast? And if it doesn't, then they should question. So that's what I'm hoping we can establish, is just some baseline. Okay, we know this is true. So if that's true, this other stuff might be questionable. Yeah. So that's why I'm here. I hope we can do that. Good.
I think it's going to be good. I'm excited because some of these are my questions too.
Oh yeah, well, and mine as well. But Bryan, I did want you to kind of tell people a little bit about your education, just so that they kind of know that you do know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I do have a mountain of school loan debt. Yeah, I was a full-time student for 13 years. And then if that wasn't enough, I also taught a local university for 11 years. Got 4 degrees out of it, but nobody seems to care when we're negotiating paychecks.
Yeah, I care,
but we're not paying.
Yeah, the university was the one who was promising so many good things with all these degrees. But you make your own way. Anyway, yeah, so I have a background in both psychology and physiology. And the physiology, if you don't know, let's say a physician, who you might be more familiar with, is somebody who deals with illness or when the body is not functioning properly. And so physiology is just a study of how the body works, its systems, those kinds of things. And as a physiologist, I've been able to, rather than work with ill people, work with athletes to help them understand how their body works so they can make it work even better.
I like that.
Yeah. And one other thing I didn't mention is Bryan is the person that when I was going through my treatment, my cancer treatment, was my advocate. He went to every doctor's appointment with me to make sure that I understood the information that they were trying to give me.
So helpful.
Yes, and then also he knows me so well because we've known each other over 20 years. He knows my body very well. He knows what I've done and stuff. Yeah, he took me to every single appointment, every chemo appointment. And so for that, I'm very grateful. And also, I just know that I've often said if I have a question and Bryan says to do this or to do that, I don't even question it. I just do it because everything he's ever told me to do has worked. So, anyways, without further ado, would you like to ask the first question?
Well, the first questions are based around mostly menopause, women in their older, us going through our change and all our bodies doing the different things that we don't understand. So I will ask the first one.
I actually think they all three kind of deserve their own answer.
Good.
I think.
Well, I love that. So, and there's actually 5 that are all, or 6 even, that are kind of all related. So if we get repetitive, then we'll just kind of say the same thing. But let's start with number 1. Okay, so Liz Bell, she asks, why are we told that exercise won't help weight loss? And it seemed to be effective in my 20s and 30s. Why isn't it now after 50? So she's obviously having some trouble losing weight now that she's older. And why has that changed for her?
Well, it's interesting. The message about exercise won't help with weight loss comes from the medical community. And they are experts at studying or conducting trials in what we call the drug model, which means you find somebody with a problem, you throw a drug at it, and then if it fixes it, great, if it doesn't do anything, then you reject it. Well, they treated obesity or overweight in that same way, and exercise was the drug. So they said, okay, we're going to bring in our subjects, we're going to have them exercise, and over time we'll see if they lose weight. Well, what they found was that in general, the women did not lose weight.
Just with isolated exercise.
Just coming in and doing it. And I would say, the exercise that they prescribed that was also supervised so that they did actually do the exercises and the workouts. It was done for a reasonable amount of time, and you would have thought, if exercise works, certainly that should have caused some weight loss.
Well, was it mostly cardiovascular exercise?
They've done both.
Okay,
right,
cardiovascular.
to answer that question.
Okay.
Yeah, and that wasn't the problem.
Okay.
The problem, and of course, the men, to the women's chagrin, lost some weight. Right?
Of course, it always happens that way.
They have more muscle mass and testosterone.
Yeah,
jerks.
It's part of that toxic masculinity. So what they realized later, after they conducted those studies, they published the results and says, hey, people, exercise doesn't work. So come take our fen-phen. We'll make you lose weight. Come get a surgical procedure. We'll make you lose weight. Exercise does not work. So in a way, they also had a conflict of interest as they were conducting those exercises.
No.
They kind of had a bias that they were hoping that there was no home remedy to America's weight problem. Later studies conducted by those academics who says, now, wait a minute, this can't be right. There is the whole numbers thing that goes on. How many calories are going in? How many calories are going out? The body isn't just creating calories out of nothing. Something has to be going on. And sure enough, as you might expect, when the women went home, they compensated for the calories that they were burning during exercise with the food that they were eating at home. Now, this wasn't a binging type behavior. It was just literally 2 or 3 extra bites per meal.
Because you're hungry after you exercise.
You're hungry, yeah. And it doesn't even have to be a conscious thing. They didn't necessarily experience greater degree of hunger than they were normally. And there was fatigue, when they get. But as they observed them later in a controlled environment where they observed how much food they ate, sure enough, they ate just enough calories to compensate for the additional calories that they were burning each day, and the net result was no weight loss. And the men, interestingly enough, did not eat enough to compensate for the calories that they were burning, and which resulted in their modest weight loss. Right. Now, this is nothing like what an athlete would do, or a bodybuilder, or a fitness contestant. I mean, because they're monitoring their caloric intake just as closely as they are their exercise. And that's why, the fitness community, when they saw these results, decades ago, went, what? Yeah. How is this happening if exercise doesn't do anything, But sure enough, that's where it came up. The women were compensating. And the compensation lasts for about 2 to 3 days. So if you burn a whole bunch of calories one day, your body will try to replace those extra calories for about 2 to 3 days. So if you can survive those days, then...
Oh, that's interesting.
Then you'll be good.
What happens with our metabolism from when we're in our 20s to when we're in our 50s?
Well, nothing if your body is the same in your 50s as it was in your 20s and 30s.
Which isn't usually the way it is after having babies and those kinds of things,
When we say metabolism, it means a lot of different things. Our metabolism is essentially our calorie budget for the day. How many calories do we burn just in our daily activities, just being awake? And it's largely based on 2 things: how much lean body mass or muscle tissue that you have, and how much daily physical activity. And whether that's walking around the office, walking around the house, actual exercise, whatever that may be. So every day there's a budget, right? How many calories are expended and how many calories are consumed. Now, as we get older, we tend to be more sedentary. In our early 20s, we're in college, we're running around campus, we're carrying backpacks up and down hills. I mean, we're running around all the time. We're bored on the weekends, so we're trying to run around with friends.
Or we have little kids we're chasing.
Or we have little kids that we're chasing around the house. An example of that is I put a Fitbit on my 14-year-old at home. And I thought he was cheating at first, but every single day he was like at 22 to 25,000 steps. And I'm like, holy cow, what is this kid doing, But it just goes to show that they really are more active. And as we get older, we get into our careers or our daily routines, and we're less active.
Makes sense.
And with the daily aches and pains, you're not really in the mood to get up and do a bunch of jumping jacks. So now, in addition to that, there are some actual, let's call them changes associated with aging in our body's ability to switch from different fuel sources. And let's call this metabolic flexibility. Just like your regular flexibility, ability to touch your toes can go away with age, you also have a metabolic flexibility, and that's your body's ability to adapt quickly to a sudden need for energy, for fuel. So a little kid can run around and he's burning a bunch of fuel, and then he sits down and he eats, then he takes a nap, but then he's running around and he's burning a bunch of energy, and then he takes a snack and he's running around. And the body of a child is easily switches from, let's store these few calories, let's mobilize calories for activity, let's store some, let's mobilize some, let's store some, mobilize some. As we get older, our ability to mobilize energy decreases over time. And our ability to store doesn't really change, right? So we have a net increase essentially in our storage of calories, but it can be compensated for with exercise. I mean, it really is the kind of the magic bullet of aging problems. So that's why it's more difficult when you're 50, not just because your metabolism is changing, but you also are more sedentary as a middle-aged adult.
So the answer to that would be to just exercise.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, and Barbara Ann asks, weight loss without muscle loss, to in the elderly or in
Yeah.
your 50s. So
Yeah.
sometimes when you're trying to lose weight, you
Now, I
end
hope
up
you're not saying
losing.
if you're in your 50s, you're elderly.
She put 50s in parentheses. She's about there.
Well,
So we're all about there.
everyone sitting at this table is in the 50s.
So just losing weight without